Here we go.
G'day fans and welcome to another exciting episode of Rip It Off the Card. Yes, it's a Wednesday night. It's absolutely fantastic and you would not believe it. The rest of the country is in lockdown. Everybody's stuck in their houses. They can't go anywhere. But we in Melbourne are free to go anywhere we like. And where are we? In our usual haunts. Aaron's at his store. I'm at home. How boring is that? So here you go, Mr. Aaron. What's going on in the world, man?
Good. It's the beginning of school holidays. So we've had kids at home, sleepovers, lots of kids in the shop. It's an interesting time, isn't it?
Very good stuff. Now, tonight is a bit of a weird one. Last week, we said we were broadcasting obviously on Facebook and on YouTube. This week, we're actually on Facebook, YouTube, and I have no idea if it's even working, Twitch. So if anybody's got a bit of a Twitch going on, if they want to go to Twitch to see if we're there, we've set it up, but we haven't actually checked it or anything. So I've got no idea if we're twitching or not. But yes, we'll have to sort of see.
What we need is a Ralph Wiggum emoji saying, "I'm twitching."
Yeah, well, it's like a twerking for nerds, isn't it? Really, when you see a rare collectible, you're like, a whole stack now. Greg King, look at that. He's the first one in because he's the Doctor Who dude from Wait. Now, if you're a Doctor Who fan, you are going to be losing your load tonight, right? So we're just going to tell you, mate, don't start licking the screen or anything like that. You've got to just learn to control yourself because you're going to be seeing some stuff that is going to make you go absolutely nutso, which is very, very cool. And I agree with Colin. Yes, back for another week of madness. So, yes, very, very groovy. Now, a few things to cover off before we get into the exciting stuff. I wanted to correct a couple of things that I said from last week's episode. Which was the Skywalker Ranch thing, we were talking about Darth Vader's stuntman, and I said it was somebody called Paul Anderson. I realised afterwards it was Bob Anderson. See if I didn't know that. And I also was cracking the story about the whole Don Bees thing. Now, if you remember this is what Don Bees looked like from Skywalker Ranch. I mentioned last week that we're walking down past the place. He was carrying a bat of some sort, and he dropped it when the sound recorder was recording audio. And I was thinking afterwards, like, why would he have been carrying a bat? And then I remembered, it's like he was actually carrying a softball bat, like a baseball bat, because there was actually going to have a match that day between Skywalker Ranch and the Industrial Light and Magic team. And we actually watched, because they've got their own softball field at Skywalker Ranch, and he was actually playing softball, and that's the reason why he dropped the bat when the guy was recording the audio. So I just wanted to clarify that, because even I couldn't remember. It's like, why would he be carrying a bat? So he wasn't going to bash the shit out of some nerds in the area, because no, he was going to actually bash a couple of balls, which were connected to some nerds. No. Unbelievable. So I just wanted to clarify that. And for those who were wondering, and I didn't even realize this myself, we showed this last week. This was the Skywalker Ranch trip. The date was in there. So I don't know if you can read that or not, but it's actually the 1st of September, 1993. So how's that for a little bit of history? So what do you reckon that, dude? So it's immortalized forever. What do you reckon?
That's pretty interesting. We had someone asking what's our Twitch name so they can check and see if we're on.
Who asked that? It's just Sci-Fi Zone. Oh, here we go. Yes, just Sci-Fi Zone. So have a look. It's working on Twitch. Hang on. You don't go, it's working. It's go, it's working. It's working. Get a bit of little Annie action. What do you reckon? Sorry, what was that?
That's what I did.
Did you? Do it again.
Great minds think alike.
Do it again. Do it
it's
again.
Working. I can't do the low voice like you.
Dude, you just gotta grab a pair, son, and just go, it's working, it's working. Oh, you can't do it. If you go, it's working, it doesn't work, dude. Yeah, then it's not working. So there you go. A good old April's joined us once again from Scotland. I love it. We've got people dialing in from Scotland. How exciting is all that? Which is very, very cool. Now, speaking of things that are exciting, as always, we have our weekly writers section. Now, I don't know if he's with us at the moment, but who joined us actually wasn't on Saturday. It was on last Thursday. Who was with us?
This is regular customer of the shop who also watches the show, David Dixon, who's Dicko. And as you can see, he slipped into Dags' shirt and posed for us. We call Ditko the walking wallet, not because he spends a lot, because his skin's so leathery. He just turned 80, so happy birthday, Dicko. And we'll see you in the next couple of days, mate.
Now, I just want to highlight. Now, Dicko's obviously wearing your shirt with my head all over it. Now, if I ever look at that shirt again and there are saliva stains on that shirt for where my face would normally be, I'm going to be very upset. So, or
It's
it could be very
okay,
complimentary.
it's okay.
Huh?
None of them are saliva stains.
I'm glad we got that clarified. All right, very good. You watch people going to be going, it's an adult show all of a sudden. Now, I have a bit of a bone to pick with good old Mr. Aaron. Right now, for everybody who's watching this show right now, right, you're going to be upset, right? Because we were working in the store on Saturday, and he's got his big TV set, and he said, "Oh, we'll put on a bit of Batman, the '66 version, the third season with Eartha Kitt and all the rest of it." And of course, it's one episode after another after another. 6 hours into it, Aaron says he's had enough, right? Because he's where he sits, he's looking at the TV screen, and he turned it off. And I said, dude, you don't go dissing the 66 Batman. You don't go switching it off before the season's finished. What is wrong with you, sir? This is a collectible store. That's the Batman 66 show. You just don't switch it off. And I tell you, I had tears. This just wasn't.
I just have to say, I watched 6 hours of Batman. Didn't really watch because we're working. I just felt like watching some Lost in Space, though. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I was cut up. It's like he's turned off the 66 Batman in the middle of the store. It's like no one of the customers just walked out. They were just unimpressed. So
do I pay you to serve the customers, or do I pay you to watch 66 Batman? And the whole way
very
through,
good. You're right.
The whole way through, this is 66 Batman. I don't like Eartha Kitt. I like Julie Newmar. Where's Julie Newmar?
All right, I'll give you that one. So, yeah, all right, give the third season of the arse of Batman. Yeah, I agree. See, Thomas, yeah, it just wasn't good enough. And good old Dicko, he's actually with us. It looks daggy on him. Very, very good. Very cool. Now, one of the things that we were going to discuss or bring up, this is for audience participation, see what everybody thinks of this, is the idea of actually us producing our own merchandise, our own T-shirts and hats and caps and all that other tripey stuff. And, of course, we haven't worked out what the designs will be yet. Now, originally, we kicked off with the I Love Spankin' shirt, and I think Rob, I don't know if he's with us at the moment, was hanging out for one of these. And we thought, well, we might put it out there. So, and we're actually being a tad serious. What do people think about the idea of actually producing our own merchandise for the show? So if you want to see other examples, you could have the old boring, rip it off the card T-shirt, boring, no one likes that. Or you could have the obligatory Aaron's Collectables shirt, although you could spice it up a bit by chucking in a bit of the old, I went to Aaron's Collectables and all I got was this lousy shirt. Whatever that. So you get the gag, right? Because you're a collectible store. You actually went to the store and bought the shirt. That's actually, oh my God, you just
I do.
Get it.
I do get the gag. I'm just thinking, how many do I order, Dags?
Very, very cool. Yes, Batman and Lost in Space. I know it's a bit of an unusual combination, wasn't it? So, and as it turned out, Lost in Space had no audio, so we couldn't watch it anyway. So there you go. Yes. Anzi's joined us tonight. When did he start working for you? Well, that's a good question, eh? So very good stuff. Now, we've got a big show tonight. We will not get through all of the stuff, so there's going to be a few tears of sadness from some of our Doctor Who friends, but we may have to have a part 2. But that's a good point, Greg. Yes, the Hawaiian shirt is my merch. Oh, yeah, there you go. Every time you see one of these, you just
slap Dags' face on anything and it becomes your merch. And by the way, this Saturday we're just watching Batman and Robin, the movie, on loop.
Yeah, right, because Aaron won't be in the store on Saturday. And by the way, as Greg, as I always like to say, it's not the shirt, it's the body that's in it. So there you go. Anyway, let's move on for something very, very exciting before we start getting a bit too adult and insulting our audience or ourselves. We're going to kick in some news. Got a new logo for it. How about that? So what are you kicking off with, man?
For $1.
All right, what are we doing?
Okay, here we go. These are some new mini busts that are out at the moment. They should be hitting the shops pretty soon, or they're around anyway. They'll be available in new shops. We haven't got them, but if you're interested in them, you can order them through us and we can get them in. What's unusual about these, there's some really good classic horror stuff that you don't see a lot of merchandise in. So this is a little creature from the Black Lagoon, and you've got Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, both of who, are the black and white versions, but they're still pretty cool. They're available at the moment, and I think if we go to the next one, some of the coolest ones that are out are the 3 masks from Halloween 3, which is the Halloween movie that everyone tends to sort of ignore because Michael Myers isn't in it. But it's a really cool movie in itself. And for anyone who's been into horror, have you seen the Halloween Kills new Halloween trailer dropped this week. And what was really interesting, they paid homage to this movie. 3 of Michael Myers' kills in the movie were wearing the skull, the jack-o'-lantern, and the witch from Halloween 3, which is a sort of a nice callback to that movie.
Here's a thought for you. Now that I'm looking at the middle character, what do you reckon we put a nice little Rip It at the Card logo right off the middle of those underpants right there? Don't even think of putting my face on that.
I think that's meant to be a sack of candy.
Is it? I looked at it as someone's Y fronts. So what does everything get there? Are they Y fronts or is it a sack of candy? Oh, well.
All 3 of them are trick-or-treating, but we can see where your mind goes to.
Hey, I'm just looking at it from a merchandising and marketing possibilities here, right? So there you go. So you put an Aaron's Collectables logo just there and you go, I really love Aaron's Collectables. A bit too much. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? So, yes, very, very cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's another group shot of the 3. And they're right down to putting the Silver Shamrock logo on the mask on the side there, you can see, which is very awesome. And then the next picture, which is a lineup of everyone, it has one of my favorite horror characters ever. I guess it's Sci-Fi, but the They Live alien, which doesn't really see much production at all. I think there's been a mask that you can get, but you really don't see any of this dude. So it's actually good to see the John Carpenter movie getting a bit of love.
But the problem with that is it should be black and white, because every time you looked at them, it was through the glasses and they always came out black and white. So, I mean, it would look probably a little more screen accurate if you actually did that rather than making them blue. So
I wonder if half of the audience is just seeing a normal newsreader there.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. You just put a normal dude in there, right? And they go, that's the They Live guy. And you go, well, he just looks like a normal dude. You made you need the glasses. Without the glasses, you won't see anything. So there you go. I like this from good old Jeffro. Yeah, rip it off the jocks. Exactly right. Yes, I love it. So it's I like this. It's a sack of something. Yes, very, very cool. But yeah, that does look good. And I do think that, the They Live guy looks quite cool. But yeah, the busts are very, very cool. Very, very groovy. There you go. But not as cool as this. Is that right? Look at that.
Right. Oh, this is the big news this week that everyone's been talking about, and the internet's kind of going nuts on some of the toy forums. It's finally here, the reveal of the figures for the new He-Man series on Netflix, the one that's being done by Kevin Smith. And here's the side box art, which is very reminiscent of the old art from the original 80s He-Man, where they had fantastic artwork on all the boxes. And we're going to go through the first wave of figures. And you can see here we've got classic He-Man standing in front of Castle Grayskull, Skeletor and God Skeletor, which is a new character we haven't seen before, Mossman, Evelyn, and a new sort of updated version of Battle Cat. So anyone who's into He-Man, I think you've got to be pretty pleased because obviously they're going for something that's going to be mainstream because it's going to be back on Netflix, so it's not just going to be the hardcore fans that collect this stuff. And the thing you find with toys, the more popular something is, generally the toys aren't as good quality, because if you've got no one watching Star Wars and they want collectors to buy Star Wars stuff, they have to do really amazing figures. If you've got everyone watching the Clone Wars, then they can put out Clone Wars figures with no articulation and hardly any accessories, and kids will buy them anyway. And this is this line looks really good because they've kept up the level of detail that the He-Man collectors have expected. You can tell they're maybe not as well painted maybe for the He-Man, and they maybe look a little bit more plasticky. But they're obviously going for, a more wide release. So hopefully these aren't the type of things that disappear and get scalped as soon as they hit the shelves. Hopefully kids will watch the show and love the show, and after the first wave of adults run out and clean out the shelves, they'll be restocked and everyone will be able to get them. And they might be at a reasonable price in regular toy shops, especially if the show's a success.
Here's the obvious question then. Are you going to be stocking these?
We don't stock anything new unless people order it in. We're so packed with secondhand stuff that it's really hard for us to do new stuff as well. And if we do new stuff, we kind of want to do it well. So we'd want to sort of, have enough, not just one of everything that comes in. So at the moment, I'm only doing ordering stuff in for people if they're after it. So at the moment, no, I'm not getting it. But if you come in and talk and you want a case of something, I'm happy to get one of everything for you. And then the rest of it we can put into the shop and kind of do it that way.
So for those who are wondering, when he said he only stocks secondhand stuff, he's referring to the staff because we're all second hand. So there you go. But that Skeletor does look pretty Mickey Mouse, I've got to say. So yeah, very, very cool.
Yeah, so far everything's looking good. I've enjoyed the trailer, and the buzz has been positive about the trailer, and I've enjoyed looking through the figures and seeing the different figures that are coming out, and they seem relatively good. The only thing, I guess, if you're an old school He-Man fan that they don't have is every He-Man figure used to have a different action. Or these are just standard action figures by the look of it, but they do come with extra accessories, and there is different arms and different heads on some of them and things like that. So I guess, Dags, what do you think of them not being a traditional sort of He-Man fan? What were your thoughts when you saw them?
Well, the He-Man character is a bit of a much. It's just a big-ass dude wearing his loincloth and he's carrying his sword. But the Skeletor stuff I do like. I am very impressed. I mean, I was never really sort of taken by this, just the standard skull kind of impression from the cartoons. But in this style, they look a bit more aggressive, a bit more threatening. And that actually works rather than just being here's the skull, big deal, so what. But no, it actually looks very, very groovy, I've got to say. So, yeah.
I usually look at lines like this and think, if there wasn't a cartoon supporting it, would it be a success? So are the figures good enough to warrant a release just on their own? And I think they are pretty cool figures. If they weren't He-Man and McFarlane released a wave of Spawn or something like this and it looks similar, I think people would be pretty pleased. So there's some interesting stuff coming out.
You're right, Jared. You're right. This is just the beginning. If the show takes off, then expect to see a second, third, fourth wave, which will probably include all the other characters. And Jared's saying he can't wait for an Orko. So, yeah.
Well,
exactly
the interesting thing is they've already got a built-in audience who are going to buy it, because there's a lot of guys that have been collecting He-Man sort of every month anyway with everything that comes out. What will be interesting to see is, with a new show coming onto Netflix, those regulars will still buy it. What will the increased audience bring, and what will the sales be? Because the more sales there are of the figures, generally, the more figures they can bring out, and that generally is something that collectors are happy about. And then they can bring out bigger play sets, and they won't be as expensive because there's a bigger run and things like that. So hopefully this is a successful launch. And this is an interesting one. This is Mossman, and you can see he's got a bit of the Swamp Thing happening there, but I really love that one of his hands is replaceable, and he obviously has vines that come out and can grab things and things like that. So it's a Mossman, but it kind of reminds me of some of the Resident Evil stuff from way back. There was a character in that sort of had a big viney arm that could rip stuff out. So it'll be very interesting to see how this all ties into the cartoon. I think everyone's going to be interested in seeing that.
I tend to agree with you, Jared. It's almost like it's for them to screw up. It's almost got success written over it already. Some things you just know they can't lose unless someone really screws the pooch. And I agree with someone else saying, Jared also said, with Kevin Smith involved, you would think that this has the potential to do very, very well. It's like when a product is done for the love of it and because the person creating it and working with it, it's a passion project, it generally turns out really good rather than just the money spinners going, oh, let's just revamp it because we want the dollars. But yeah, it's really, really cool.
And it does feel that this is going to be a good product. If you look at the voice cast they've got behind it, I can't think of many cartoons, maybe the Disney level of movie stuff that has such a big voice cast. But for a TV show to attract this, they're really, putting a lot of effort and care into it. So I really hope they smash it out of the ballpark. It'll be interesting to see.
Well, they've already got a ready-made fan base, so you think, you can do no wrong. And it's an interesting one, because they use Mossman, they actually put material over it. Over a long period of time, it probably would start to reek. And but maybe that's meant to be it's smell-o-vision for the character. So very good stuff. So there you go. Get ready for a bit of He-Man Masters of the Universe action. What can we say? It's going to be very, very cool. All right, so we're moving on to the classic eBay section today. Guess what we're talking about? What are we talking about, Mr. Aaron?
Well, the whole theme of tonight is really Doctor Who, isn't it? So I thought with the eBay section, we're going to have all Doctor Who items. Interestingly, because I choose just local Australian stuff and don't do worldwide, because then it gets a bit tricky with different currencies, there isn't as broad a amount of merchandise as you might think has been sold on Australian eBay, and you might be a bit off on the guesses, because Australia is sort of a more localized market when it comes to Doctor Who. So we'll just have to see. I know there's a few Doctor Who aficionados watching tonight, so we'll see how close some of these guesses get.
Here's an interesting question just regarding Master Universe from Adzi. Is going to be an origin storyline. I don't think anybody knows.
No, I don't know. I guess that for a new audience, they have to touch on it. But Kevin Smith has said this starts up where the original cartoon sort of finished off. So I don't know if they're saying that sort of as hyperbole to get the original fans in on it and not get anyone wondering like what's going to happen. But it sounds like if there's an origin, it'll be in backstory or something. I don't know though.
Very good. Watch this space and get ready for a bit of Netflix action. All right, so tonight we're talking about good old Doctor Who, as Aaron said. Now, if you haven't seen this before, these are all sold items, so you just got to put down what you think they sold for. Don't Google it. Don't check it up. Just take a punt, take a bit of a guess, and see what the deal is. So what do you all think? What is this, by the way?
This is one of my favourite Doctor Who items. We'll be looking at it in a bit more detail later. This is a Give-A-Show projector. Now, Give-A-Show projectors have been around for ages before Doctor Who and after Doctor Who. There was even a Star Wars one with Star Wars slides. But basically, you would have a projector. They'd give you a set of different slides. Each slide had a mini comic story on, and you could project it on your wall or your brother or the roof or whatever. And it was like having your own little mini cinema at home. It is one of the easier 60s boxed merchandise to find, but all of this stuff is getting rare and it's pretty expensive. This one is in pretty good condition because they're these big boxes. As soon as they're put like in a garage or in a wardrobe and stuff gets on top of them, they get crushed pretty easily. So how much would you expect to pay?
I like this from Carol. She's going, woo, it's Doctor Who. The whole episode's about Doctor Who here, Carol. So if you like your Doctor action, just sit back and enjoy the rest of the show because we're not going to be talking about anything else except this. All right, so Chris has said 350. Joshua also said 350. Michael said 450. Emily, good to see Emily again, is at 500. Kevin's at 500. Everybody else is reading everybody else's answers, I think. Jonathan's at 425. Jeff Fro's at 110. Mark has said 650. Carol has said 850. Oh, some big dollars here. Ange with his crappy numbers, even though he tends to get a lot of them right, is at 201. Christie's at 100 round figures. Jared's at 235. Inga is back again. Good to see Inga again. Is at 250. William's at 175. And Dave is at 449, which is very, very cool. Thomas is at 245 and Rob 360. So there you go. How good is that? Very, very, oh my God, there's more of them. Okay, Collins at 160. So Ads' daughter Beck said 85. And April, all the way from Scotland, has said 500. So and I think we're still going, actually. Ads himself has said 175. Greg ding $2. So Greg's finally decided to sell a kidney and put in a proper bid for a change, which is kind of cool. And the vial, good to be violated once again on a Wednesday night, is at $350. So there you go. So everybody's got a thought and view on this one. So there you go. All right. So the Give-A-Show projector Dalek Invasion Super 8, very, very exciting. It has been used and abused. So just be aware of that. What do you reckon it went for, kids? It went for a whopping $200.
So that's one of those, I know that people were around it and a bit over and about under, but Greg got it. And I think that's actually a really good price for that. Most of them don't turn up in Australia. It's unusual for one to turn up on Australian eBay. So you're usually looking at $100 postage to get it across now. It costs about £50 plus import tax. So getting it for $216 postage locally is quite a good deal. So we'll put that into the good deal. And Greg got it because he's always after a good deal, isn't he?
I'll tell you who didn't get it. Good old Ange with his smart ass $201.01. Mate, Greg, look at that. Greg is a happy camper. Look at that. Oh, yes, the only time he actually puts in a proper bid and he wins right on the money. Oh, how grouse is that? So very, very cool. They say Greg is in the zone, mate. He's been waiting for, what's it, our 16th episode. He's waiting for 15 episodes of decent eBay stuff. And finally, this is where we're at. Anyway, Greg, get your $200 out, son, because you'll be looking at this.
Let's see if we can double down. Now, a lot of people here collect the modern character options Doctor Who figures, and we've spoken about this before, how a lot of the people who collect the figures aren't so much worried about the new series stuff, but the classic series stuff has really been going through the roof. And this is an unusual classic series one because it was an exclusive that came with the Third Doctor and a Death to the Dalek, which means it doesn't have an exterminator ray gun. It has a machine gun instead of a ray gun because of the plot line from that episode. So it's quite a hard set to find and a unique Dalek from that figure set. How much would you expect to pay?
Well, I'll tell you what, Carol's kicked it off with a whopping $1,800. Oh, there we go.
Now,
and everybody else is sitting.
Usually I won't say this, but no one's paying that much for this set. Sorry, Carol.
Well, if you're doing an Ange and you can knock like $1 off, you never know, that might be the answer. All right, Ange is up to his $55.55. Very good. Okay, let's have a look. Jonathan said 160. Joshua said 125. Okay, Inga is at 325. Kelvin is at 100. Adzi said Beck said 100. Emily's at 950. That's an interesting one. Greg is at 150. Greg's batting 1 for 1 at the moment, so he's doing well. Thomas is at 190. Dave is at 249. Chris is at 80. Ads himself is at 650. Where are we? 125 for Colin. 200 for Michael. Williams is 175, and Jared is at 125. Very good. 125. April's at 160. That's where it's sort of holding. Okay. Carol is again at 4. She's dropped the price there. You scared her off. 450. 360 for Rob. Lavers. It's Jeffro's missus. Lavers, absolutely fantastic. Said 300. So things are good when people are asking the people in the household, what do you reckon it's worth? What do you reckon it's worth? Rather than just taking a guess themselves. Absolutely fantastic. 149 for Mark. So, yes, it's a tricky one, isn't it? So, you got to love your Docky Who. All 5 inches of it. Oh, yeah, baby. Party. The Vial is going to violate this Doctor Who with the 174. And there you go. All right, we're going to have to move along. Otherwise, we're going to run out of time. So, Third Doctor and the Dalek Classic Series, 5 inches. It's loose. It's all good. And it went for, look at that, 148.
So, who was close to that? Was there a 150? Or was there a 140? Mark?
Yeah. Oh, look at this. How's that? Jeez. How about that?
Was there a 149 that popped up though? Mark.
Where's Mark? Hang on. Anything you want to say about this while I look through the prices?
No, just that I think if you were collecting the classic Doctor Who stuff, if you got it back when it came out, you'd be pretty happy with the prices stuff is going for now. And if you're trying to track it down now, it's just a matter of waiting to find a cheap version without having to put your hand too deep into the pocket. I think this stuff is really great and will be going up and up in value though. So get it when you can.
So you are right. Mark got it by $1 over our current reigning Doctor Who sort of like merchandising champion, Mr. Greg, who was out by $1. So, I mean, practice that Greg was as close as he was. So very, very good. So there's a lot of happy people out there at the moment. So yay team. Very good. All right. So it'll either be Greg or Mark. Who's going to get the third one?
So this is a DVD box set and some information about this. A customer came in today and said you cannot get, sorry, not DVD, Blu-ray. You cannot get Blu-ray Doctor Who in Australia at the moment. It was everywhere cheap up until a couple of months ago, and it seems like everywhere has pulled it and it's not available. This is a limited edition set, but we're not even talking limited edition sets. It's everything on Blu-ray has kind of disappeared from the Australian shelves, which probably means something like this could go for a bit of money. So how much are you going to be paying for these 6 shiny Blu-ray discs?
Well, keep in mind, only one person bid for it. So, it wasn't exactly like a huge demand, but there you go. All right, Jared has said 220. So there we go. Ange is at 639. I think he just types random numbers on the keyboard sometimes.
Ange is probably like left the computer.
Sorry, hang on. Whoa. Hang on, they've just pumped this one in really quickly. Where was I? So I started with Ange. Jared was a 220. Ange was a 639. Sorry, it all went very quickly. Joshua, he's obviously not very keen on this, at 40. Dave is at 299. Colin's at 95. Emily's at 325. Inga's at 165. Jonathan at 350. Carol's at 500. 100. Oh, there's everybody's got a thing here. 75 for Kelvin. Jeff Rowe, 259. Christy said 75. Michael said 85. Chris has said 90. And Thomas is at 250. 250 also for April. Mark is 199. So he's learned if you take $1 off, you've got a better chance of winning. Adzi has said 250. Rob has said 250. William said 330. Ads said Beck has said 100. Joe, good to see you sticking a nose in. Good on you, Joe. 950. Greg, he's doing all right at the moment. He said 120. And that's very, very cool. So it's a real mixed bag, isn't it? Sometimes you're thinking, these things are really straightforward. And other times they are definitely not. And the vial is vialing it for $100. Oh, absolutely fantastic. So there you go. All right. So what do you reckon I went for? Doctor Who Complete Series 9 Blu-ray.
I think everyone's going to be
exciting.
Everyone's going to feel violated at this price.
Mate, I tell you what, it's there's only one dude I go to when I want to be violated. It went for $539. Look at that.
Now that is a lot for a recent Blu-ray set. It is the Steelbook which people are collecting, but the price of these has just gone stupid. There's a lot of people after them, and there mustn't have been a lot of stock around. That was a good investment if you bought it when it came out for about $50 or $60 a year or so ago.
Carol is short by $39, but I reckon she might be pretty close to getting it.
I think she got it. When that came up, I was thinking, that's the closest one. So well done, Carol.
Yeah, considering that in the previous auction, your first bid was like 8,000 or something ridiculous. Very, very cool. Oh, look at that. It says like amazing. And it's like, what? I was like, people are just completely this is stupid.
The crazy thing about this isn't a one-off. Like all of them are going for around this price. It's just attained that value at the moment. If it'll keep that value up down the track, nobody can tell, I guess.
I reckon it's an auction, not a buy now, Jared, because Aaron picked these things out. But there you go. So very good, Carol. You got something to watch in between episodes of us, which is better than MasterChef, that's for sure. All right, so here we go. The fourth one. What do we got? Oh my God, robots.
So this is the K1 giant robot. It's another one of the character figures. It's a really well done one. This one was a bit special because you couldn't buy the giant robot like that. You had to buy the whole wave of figures because it's a builder figure, which means you buy Tom Baker and you get a little head. You buy Peter Davison and you get an arm. You keep your mind out of the gutter, Dags. You buy a Zygon and you get a leg, and you buy a Sea Devil and you get the butt or something like that. So you had to buy a whole wave of figures to get this figure, which instantly means that it is worth more than a regular figure. The rumours are that this is coming out again at Christmas as an actual figure with Tom Baker. So will that affect the price? Is this still going for a high price? Where do we think we are with this one?
I like how you say, keep my head out of the gutter. You're the one who named the monkey Spankin'. So there you go. All right. Michael said 250. Ange is at 222. Joshua's at 300. Chris is at 487. Adzi is at 95. Inga's at 221. Carol's at 300. Emily's at 500. Kelvin's at 201. April's at 180. Jared's at 226. Greg is at 120. Thomas is at 125. Marcus said 169. William said 375. Rob, hang on. Rob, the screen keeps moving too quick. Rob said 650. Colin said 340. Adzi has said that Becca said 450. Christy said 350. And Jonathan said 195. I want to see what the vial has to say about this robot, because when he violates robots, here we go. There we go. 625. And Joseph, new face of the crowd, has said a 900 round figures. Very, very good. Good to have you with us, Joseph, which is absolutely awesome. So there you go. This one also had 12 bids, so there was a little bit of fighting over this. So, there you go. All right, the K1 Robot Classic Series, 5 inches. Once again, it's all about the 5 inches, isn't it? Build-A-Figure complete. Looking very, very cool. And the price for this went for... it's the extra $1, isn't it? That makes all the difference.
So the really interesting thing about that, we have this in the shop for $299. So if you'd have come into the shop and bought it, you could have saved $2.
All right, so we've got a couple of people here. Carol said 300. Joshua said 300. So you're going to have to bust him up between the two of you, rip a couple of arms and legs off and have some fun with it. But Inga was on the right track with the ones. See, it's all about the one, isn't it? So that whoever won that won probably by $1. So there you go. Yeah, so there's got to be split up between two people. How good is that? 301. So yes, very, very cool. All right, now we've saved the best till last. This one, get your bank cards out, your credit cards, sell your kidney, sell your firstborn, because remember, keep your mind back to the episode we had weeks ago regarding videotapes. It's this.
So here you go. This is the entire series of Doctor Who on VHS. So we've just had the one picture there, which is what they showed as the first picture in their auction, but it is all the episodes. So it's about 120 tapes or something like that, with every single existing at the time classic episode of Doctor Who. And the great thing about that, it is so large, the postage is $270 for the postage alone. So how much the entire series, this is the first 26 years of episodes of Doctor Who, how much is that going for? Now, I did the episode on collecting videotapes, and some of them go for quite a lot of money, just one tape.
I like it. Andrew's taking a leaf out of Greg King's book. He clearly doesn't give a rat's ass about Doctor Who videos. So Andrew's just given us the $2. And I reckon people like Greg and that are going to be having tears going, oh, mate, that's it. You're insulting us. All right. So okay. I like this one, Jeffro. Priceless. That's not going to help us in an eBay auction. Michael has said 1,500. Colin said 765. April's at 1,000. Inga's at 879. Ange doesn't even have a VCR. Who cares about them? Just put them on your shelf and get your friends to just drool over them. Sorry, Chris has said 1,800. Here we go. Thomas is at 15,000. Oh, well done, sir. Edsy is at 1,350. April's still got hers. Oh, there you go. Well, depending on how much these go for, you could probably make a fortune out of this. Emily's at 13,000. Jonathan's at 180. Joshua's at 1,000. Joseph is at 7,000. William's at 1,200. Mark is at 500. Chris is at 1,200. Mark, I tell you what, there's a lot here. There you go. Where are we? Ange is at 3,000. Rob, is at 3,000. So there's a real disparity between the prices, isn't there? But look, don't forget, you got to include your $270 shipping costs. The vial. Oh, well, there's a jump there. Sorry, the vial is at 1843. It's a video nasty. I love that one. Jared has said $1. Oh, dude, that's a bit harsh. Yeah, that's like not even a cent per tape. Becca said 2,200. Joseph, $1 billion. Greg is at 600. Greg would sell a kidney for these. Inga, do you offer your house? Well, you can if you want. And Jared has also said $1 plus shipping. Oh, I tell you what, how's that between thousands of dollars and $1? What is wrong with you people out there? So there you go. Very, very cool. All right, so what do you reckon they went for? The Doctor Who, does it come with does it come with the actual video player itself? Who's going to play these tapes? Seriously. All right, so the Doctor Who video collection, original series in PAL, millions of tapes, $270 for shipping, and the price it went for $1.
That's a tad disappointing.
Why would you bother? You would think you would just throw them out the window, wouldn't you? So there you go.
Well, I bet you, he said, I'm just going to throw these tapes out. And someone said, oh, if you put them on eBay, they'll go for thousands of dollars. So he took all the photos, did all the eBay work, and they went for 99 cents. So,
well, I'll tell you what's funny, right? Originally, I've got to scroll through the screen. I've lost my bits and pieces. Ange said $2, and I thought, oh, Ange, you've pulled this one out of your ass, mate. You've just outstripped everybody with $2. You've got it in the bag, but he doesn't, because down here, where was it? Who was it? I've lost it.
Jared. I think it was Jared. It was Jared, I think.
Yes, Jared chucked in $1 and he gets 1 cent back. Jared, you are the owner of 50 billion videotapes that you do not want, and you've still got to pay the $270 transportation fee. How about that? Isn't that insane?
Well, it is one of those things where anyone who's collecting Doctor Who now doesn't want the whole lot. They just want to pick out the episodes they want. So there are a few rare tapes in there that would go for more, but by selling them as a lot, no one wants to buy the whole lot. If you need 2 tapes out of there, you don't want to pay $270 postage to get those 2 tapes. That said, it really just shows you VHS has really bottomed out at the moment.
Well, that's funny, because in our previous discussion about videotapes, I was saying that you were saying that there's a lot of value in them, and I was saying I don't think there is, because there's no interest in them. The people who wanted them have got them, right? Yeah. It's not like someone says tomorrow, oh, I need all these videos because I missed out last time. And I think that has a lot to do with it. But yeah, right, Jared Chick Ching. So how about that? So yes, what a classic, eh? $1 is like far out. So the guy said, "Oh, what a bargain! I got him for $1, but he has to cough up $270 to get him shipped over." So, but it'd be interesting, as you said. Sorry, I'm just going to cut you off. If he actually, whoever bought them, gets the individual tapes and then resells them again. So, sorry, what are you going to say?
Well, do you remember I worked out how much money I had spent on videos over the years, and it was something like 10 grand? Why didn't I just wait 40 years and buy them all for 99 cents?
Yeah, exactly right. You're right, Ange. $271 was the total cost. Absolutely. And you're right, Inga. You're keeping your house. Isn't that insane?
It is.
I tell you what, that's an absolute classic. But when we saw that, when Aaron sent that picture through, we had a good laugh. We thought, oh, mate, people are going to think it's worth who gets thousands of dollars. Inga was prepared to give a house up for it. But yes, anyway, not to worry. So anyway, we're about 9 minutes behind schedule at the moment because we've been gurgling on a bit too long. But we're going to talk about, guess what? This is the Greg Kings of the world. We're going to be talking about a Doctor Who. And, of course, we can't do that without showing us something very, very funky. And it's, look at that, an animated picture. Woo! There's supposed to be music, but for some reason the music didn't work. So there you go.
Oh, well. There we go.
So what are we talking about tonight, Mr. Aaron?
Okay. So here we go. We're looking at 60s Doctor Who memorabilia. And I think everybody here knows I'm a massive Doctor Who fan. And my favourite era of collectibles is the 60s. So this was one that, I was going to put a bit of effort into. And it turns out, like Star Wars, when I started going down the rabbit hole of looking at merchandise from that era, I think it's going to be a 2-part episode because there was a lot more pictures and a lot more stuff that I found. I was saying to Dad earlier, I'm a hoarder, but I'm also a digital hoarder. So if I see something online, an eBay auction or an article somewhere on Doctor Who, I tend to take a snapshot of it and keep it on a hard drive somewhere. So I've spent the last couple of weeks digging through those hard drives and finding a lot of stuff, which means it's going to be a long show.
Regarding the opening theme thing, you're right. We can all sing it, but he and I, as an Aaron and I, can go woo woo, and all you got to do is just type a lot of zeros. Everybody out there in the show goes ooh. But yes, very very good. It is going to be a long show, but we will probably have to cut this in 2 parts because we're already behind schedule. But there you go. And I like that, Christy. You've already scared the neighbours. I love it.
All the dogs are howling. Anyway, this is collecting 60s Doctor Who memorabilia, and this is the very genesis of BBC Enterprises. When Doctor Who was first formed, there really wasn't a way that the BBC marketed stuff. I'm sure a lot of people have an idea of how the BBC was set up, but it's mainly funded by the public through a license fee, and most of the stuff, the remit it was meant to be for free for everyone. So when they started merchandising stuff, they really didn't know how to do it because, they'd have a show and someone would approach them and say, oh, we want to make a figure from this. And they hadn't thought that would actually happen, that it would be popular. And so they had set up the very beginnings of BBC Enterprises where people could approach, get a license and make stuff that was official, and the BBC got like a little bit back for it. And those pictures there were meetings of the previous one, but that doesn't matter, were the meetings of some of the execs when they were setting up. And it was Walter Tutwell and Associates who got the license or had the rights to sell off the Doctor Who material. And it turns out that Doctor Who was quite popular. So, sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback.
That's all right. I'm not hearing it here, so it's all good. But yeah,
I just turned it down a bit. So, yeah. So everybody would know Doctor Who started in 1963, and pretty soon it was the flavour of the month. And there was Beatlemania, but there was also Dalek Mania because there were that many kids who got into the series, and it was one of those series that not just kids were into, but the whole family kind of watched. So you can see there that there was toy shops full of Doctor Who merchandise, and there was competitions in magazines, and even up the top there is the first Doctor, William Hartnell, looking at some of the toys that were out during his time as the Doctor. But how did we get to this point where Doctor Who went from being sort of a little known show to an overnight success? So we're going to go through the 60s merchandise, in sort of an eclectic way, because it's very hard to, track everything and then keep coming back. And so we look at different categories and things like that. And if anyone wants to throw in anything along the way, just say, and Dags will bring up the comment and we'll talk about it.
I can't help but think that once upon a time, either one of these two kids, especially this one, would have been you. That's how you would have looked at him. Fast forward 30 years later, that's you. So,
yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely true.
Yeah, very cool.
So this is some of the before the merchandise came out. Of course, Doctor Who had to be popular, and this is some of the early licensing catalogs through toy fairs and stuff that sell to the toy shops. But it turned out at the time they didn't really need to do a lot of advertising. It's very hard to find photos, but in the bottom corner there, you can see a toy shop in England in the 60s, and the whole thing is Doctor Who and Daleks from the roof to the floor. And it's quite interesting because when you think of that, it's really Star Wars, you think, was the first thing that really went nuts like that. And Doctor Who did do it in the 60s. And it is interesting because Star Wars is still everywhere, but Doctor Who from the 60s is very, very hard to find, especially in good condition. So there was a lot of it produced, and I was looking at the numbers that they were saying were selling, and I couldn't believe it because some of the things they were saying sold 250,000 units are impossible to find these days. So,
I mean, one of the reasons would have been the fact that when like Doctor Who came out, it was so revolutionary as a TV show, and like the Daleks especially. I mean, so, you fast forward 10 years or 15, 20 years and like all these other machines and robots and whatever come into the shows and movies and whatever, and the gene pool's been diluted, so to speak. But in 63, this was like cutting edge. And you could probably look back and go, well, okay, what would have preceded the Daleks in movies and TV series? It would have been very, very little. So it's like really setting off a great trend because it's something new and unique. And that's probably why stores like this capitalized on it and said, like, oh, we've got to market all the merchandise that we've got, because it is like, it's not just the newest thing in town, it's the best thing in town. And that's probably the reason why.
So, yeah.
Inga has said that was in the UK, I believe that picture was. Is that right?
It was. We'll look at it later. It was very, very sparse to find any Doctor Who stuff in Australia in the 60s and even the 70s. There wasn't a lot around.
Cool.
So this is very interesting because this is the first Doctor Who merchandise you could get. And being a timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly show, Doctor Who is probably one of the first shows that had merchandise come out, 4 or 5 decades before the show was created.
Sorry, I need to cut you off there. So the girl who was hanging off the Dalek, that was Roberta Tovey, is that right?
Roberta Tovey from the Dalek movie. She played the Doctor's granddaughter Susan in both the movies.
All right, cool.
Yep. So these items are police huts or police boxes, and they were released by Dinky Toys, and these go right back to the 20s. But of course, they were mainly sold as an accessory for kids who are collecting cars and making dioramas. And then the bottom ones, the Wardy Model Masters, they were for train sets. And then Doctor Who comes out, and then suddenly all these collectors are going back and trying to pick up the Dinky Toys because now the police box has become synonymous with Doctor Who, to the point where the BBC got into a legal row with the police and actually copyrighted the police box, so the police can't use the police box anymore because it's more known for Doctor Who. That is absolutely true, where the BBC actually stole the police box from the police, and the police can't use it anymore because it was disused by the police, and the BBC swooped in and took the copyright.
Now, just get a very, very fast answer. Why is the TARDIS a police box in the first place?
Because it's meant to have like a chameleon circuit so it blends in wherever it lands. And it was going to change every single episode. And then they worked out that cost a lot of money to get a different prop every episode. So the first episode was always going to be a police box. And they go, do you know what? It's stuck as a police box, and that saves X amount of money every episode.
Very, very cool. And we've got to say hello to Michelle, who's woken up after a snooze. So you missed all the best bits of the show. But
hi, Michelle.
Now you just got to put up with all the Doctor Who stuff. So there you go. Only gagging. It's all good.
So the first official Doctor Who merchandise, or what scrapbookers or collectors might have, was the Radio Times the week before Doctor Who came out. And it has that article, next week in the Radio Times, is Doctor Who, a new series coming. And it's funny, at the time, people didn't know if it was going to be a hospital drama. I've heard some people thought You know, they tuned in begrudgingly because it was going to be another Dr. Kildare, and then they were shocked that it was a science fiction program. So allegedly, the Radio Times was going to be a Doctor Who cover for that week, and then at the last minute it changed, so it only had an article up the back of the Radio Times instead.
So amongst all the stuff that we're going to be looking at, how much of this is actually yours?
I've probably got most of it. There are some really rare items that, you know, I take pictures of eBay items, and sometimes when I lose an auction, I keep the picture because I just like to see how much stuff goes and what's out there. So there's a few people, like I have to thank my friend Jonathan, let me take pictures of some of his collection. There's a couple of websites, the Space Museum, where there's probably some pictures sourced from there. And Mick Hall is a big Dalek collector. He's a friend of mine, and some of the stuff he's sent me has been incredible. So there's different places for all of this stuff, but a lot of it I've had over the years.
Very cool. Okay.
So November the 23rd, 1963 was the day the first episode of Doctor Who was shown, and it was totally overshadowed by a little political event that happened on the same day, which was tragically Kennedy's assassination. And what this actually meant was no one really watched the first episode of Doctor Who when it was on. I mean, people did watch it, but I think the whole world was kind of stunned and shell-shocked at the time. And something incredible happened that really doesn't happen much, especially back in the 60s. They repeated the first episode of Doctor Who before they showed the second episode. And this was good because people got to see it without sort of being in that sort of JFK assassination mode. But it was also bad because TV critics got to see the first and the second episode next to each other. And I think anyone who's Doctor Who fan and has followed the series knows the first episode, Unearthly Child, is a classic piece of television. It's absolutely amazing and still stands up as a 25-minute piece of drama today that anyone can watch. If you like the new series, you can check that out and go, you know what, that wasn't so bad. But if you stay for the rest of the story, the next 3 episodes are pretty dry. They go back in time and it's like cavemen running around in a really small forest kind of thing, trying to make fire, and it doesn't make for the best television these days. It's a curio you probably watch once, but you watch Unearthly Child and then skip to the Daleks usually. So the reviews at the time, you can see there, after 1 episode, the TV reviews were already Doctor Who shows signs of lagging after a great first episode, so you know it's not going to last that long. These slides.
I just want to cut in. So Carol's actually watching us on her television. Now, if we stay here long enough, we'll actually burn into her screen. So when she turns the TV off, we'll still be there. How good is that? Sorry, keep going.
So these are Radio Times from the 60s. We saw that Doctor Who's first sort of appearance in the public was in Radio Times. There are a lot of people who collect the covers that had Doctor Who. William Hartnell just had 3 covers over his run as the Doctor, and all of them are incredibly hard to find because Radio Times was just a disposable TV magazine. And it's also made out of that very cheap newsprint paper, so it doesn't store very well. So all of them are hard to find, and all of them go for a frickin' fortune. So
now here's an answer you could probably keep pretty short about your own collection. Is it at home? Is it in the store? Is it on display? Yep.
I have, at my place, I have most of my 60s stuff out on display. So I have a room full of Doctor Who stuff, and then most of the modern stuff I admire, put into a box, and it goes under the bed, into the wardrobe, into the garage kind of thing. So because I've opened the shop, a lot of I used to have one of those collections, one in the box, one out on display, and another one just in case. I've had to prune that down to just one and not 3 of all the new stuff kind of thing. Yeah, I do have quite a big display. Some of the photos we'll be seeing are, from my house, and some of the display. The picture at the front that Dad showed, I think all the merchandise around that was mainly from my collection. Very cool. Quite a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you need to build an extension. You got to own the house first before you can do that, dude. Missed the mark. Anyway, continue.
And the first official merchandise it wasn't for sale, but the first things you could really get that were Doctor Who were cast cards. So if you watch Doctor Who and go, oh my God, this is mind blowing, I have to collect stuff from this, you could write to the BBC and they had cast cards, and they're kind of all from the first episode. You can see by the makeup, they got these out pretty fast because I think they were shocked how popular the show was. And if you were super lucky, you might get a signed cast card. So you could you could write off to the BBC and say, I love Doctor Who, is there anything you can send me? And you'd get a standard letter with a couple of cards in it. And if you were really lucky, some of them might be signed.
And it's if you're really lucky, they're actually signed by the actual actors.
Yes. So, yeah, it's one of the ways you can usually tell a genuine autograph it's on a cast card, because the cast cards are worth a fortune anyway. And so no one's going to wreck the value of a card by putting a dodgy autograph on it. People are unscrupulous, but they're so hard to find in the first place. They're very, very hard. And they're just the first 4 cast cards. They did many of them right up to the new series, where they do postcards, which are the same kind of thing, but a bit more well known than the cast cards.
So the cast cards that we just saw, did you have any of those?
I've got a couple of them. I haven't got a William Hartnell one, and I haven't got a signed one. I've had some and sold them when I needed to make the money, but I haven't got any at the moment.
The worst thing you would have is you have 2 cast cards for the same actor, but they're completely different signatures. It's like, oh, that's when you get a bit upset.
Well, I'll tell you something interesting. There are like that, because sometimes actors have signed. John Pertwee's a great example, where as the Doctor, he has a very flowing autograph, and you get a nice autograph with him. But then one of those card companies said, we're going to put your autograph in the cards. Here's 100 cards, sign them all off. None of them look like nice John Pertwee autographs. There's debate if it's even him, but, it'd be dodgy for an official company to forge cards, kind of thing.
Very good. And Kelvin's got a Peter Davidson from, I think it's Davidson from his first season. Yeah, Peter Davidson's first season. So there you go. Sorry, anyway, let's move on.
No problem. So one of the things that was very popular in the 60s and right through till the original Doctor Who ended, and a lot of people collect now, are the Doctor Who annuals. And annuals are sort of a very British thing, though we could get them in Australia, where each year, just before Christmas, all the popular shows got a book, which was a large hardback, which had puzzles and stories and a couple of photographs if you were lucky. And all the annuals across the board, not just Doctor Who, I kind of think everyone who collects them will agree. A lot of them you read and you think, whoever put this together has absolutely no idea about the show. This is the cheapest cash-in ever. Doctor Who kind of avoided it sometimes, and sometimes the annuals are real rubbish. The artwork is variable. Usually the front cover artwork is pretty amazing for all the Doctor Who annuals. I really love the covers of them, but it's once you get into the annuals, it's very variable whether they're quality or not quality. Through the 60s, the Hartnell annuals are pretty reasonably easy to get, because I think they did sell a lot of them and they do kind of survive in a bookshelf. The Troughton annuals are a little bit harder to get because maybe he wasn't as popular at the time. The Dalek books are the ones that surprise me. So if you look at the Dalek books down the bottom, there's the Dalek book. The orange one is the Dalek World book and the Dalek Outer Space book. I was researching this on numbers, and they were selling 250,000 copies, which is not a small amount. That's a lot of books, and some of those are really hard to get, especially in good condition. And I think the thing with the Dalek books, which is a bit different from the Doctor Who annuals, is Doctor Who annuals were made by world distributors and Daleks were made by Panther. You get a Doctor Who annual out of the shelf and you do pretty well. You get a Dalek annual out of the shelf, and if you hold it by the top, it rips the entire spine off. So I can imagine if the spine comes off, they're the first books to get taken to the op shop or got rid of. But some of those are quite hard to get, especially in really good condition. And there's a lot of collectors out there that are looking for the set with nice spines.
So April, the covers clearly, it's as was mentioned, I think a couple of episodes ago about Star Wars toys, colors. Everybody loves colors because that's what brings in children's eyes, right? They just see pretty colors and they just go completely nuts, especially considering Doctor Who would have been black and white back then. So then they see a color cover of a colored Dalek. And you just go nuts. You go, oh my God, it's actually a color version. And of course, once you bought the product, when you take it home, you know, whether it's good or not is irrelevant. But yeah, it would be the eye catchy. It's the eye candy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. When the Dalek movies came out, one of the big sells was see the Daleks in color, because even in magazines, there weren't many color pictures of Daleks from the time in the newspaper. So people were freaked out when, oh my goodness, there's a red Dalek kind of thing. So it was a big selling point.
Now, here's a question for everybody out there. Who is Docky Who?
There you go. So this is all from the first Doctor Who annual. And what's really unusual there on the top left corner is the mock-up of the annual that was sent out to stores as sort of trade magazines so they could pick up on it and order them for the shop. And it's really unusual for this to turn up, but it has turned up really recently. And you can see why they didn't use it, because it's got a red TARDIS instead of a blue TARDIS. And it's got a Dalek on there, and the rights for the Daleks were different from the rights for Doctor Who. So you'll see in a lot of merchandise, there's Dalek merchandise and there's Doctor Who merchandise, but there's not a lot of Doctor Who and the Daleks merchandise, because I think it cost double the licenses to get all the different monsters. But what I was saying about the annuals being pretty average, the first annual was actually quite good. It's kind of thought that the first annual was written by David Whittaker, who was the script editor for Doctor Who at the time, so he had a handle on the material. It's interesting with the annuals where you see the Who is Doctor Who, because they don't really tell you. They give you a lot of stuff about, you know, the past and the future, and is he an alien and stuff like that. But it's not like there's anything set in stone in any of the annuals, just interesting little asides and stories. And if you were a fan of Doctor Who, this was a great annual, because it had the Zarbi, which were from the show, which are those big ants, and the Menoptera, the butterflies. It had the Vord and the Sensorites. So it was a good way to start. If you were a fan of the show, you'd probably have loved this annual.
So the big ants, they've just taken them out of them. So if you can't see it, everybody, there's like big ass ants down here. It's like, yeah, they're straight from them. Yeah, the movie Big Ants Taking Over the World.
Well, the BBC budget wasn't quite as big as the Hollywood budget. So if you see the Dags isn't a fan, if you saw the Zarbi, it's basically a guy in an ant costume with these two human legs at the bottom of it. They're quite they're of their time, shall we say? But yeah, so yeah, the second annual came out the same year as Doctor Who and the Invaders from Space. The second annual is interesting because I think they didn't maybe pay for the rights to get the Zarbi and all that again, or something was up, because there's stories. You can see down the bottom again, there's giant ants and the Menoptera in the giant butterfly, but they're no longer called that anymore. So I don't know what happened there. The art's still pretty good. The stories weren't as good this year. The Invaders from Space storybook is an interesting one, because it's an annual-sized book, but it just has one story in. The annuals were a mixture of text stories, comics, puzzles, and things like this. The Invasion from Space was actually a storybook, and it was the Doctor lands in the Great Fire of London, picks up a family and saves them, and takes them into the future and on travels, and they save the Earth. Interestingly, years and years ago when I was doing research into Doctor Who, I found out in Australia we got the Doctor Who and the Invaders from Space book as the annual that year, and we didn't get the 66 annual, and that's why the Invaders from Space is quite a hard book to find in the UK, but I found it quite common, not common, but it turns up more than the annual in Australia.
So why wouldn't the Doctor just roll up and says, oh, it's a great fire in London. Oh, I'll just go back forward in time, pick up a few fire extinguishers, go back, and then just, instead of saving the family, put the bloody fire out, dude.
Because back then, the TARDIS, he couldn't control where it went.
Mate,
but you would think the TARDIS had some fire extinguishers in it, yeah.
Oh, jeez, tell you what, unbelievable. So there you go.
Dags is loving this episode.
Yeah, I know. The word is nostalgic instead of cheap prop. Of course, we all talk about it is nostalgic, and I might hang a bit of shit on it, but I can completely respect it. So, just take my words with a grain of salt. There you go.
And then we have the annuals go into the Troughton years, and again, this is interesting because we've got the Phoenix in the TARDIS, and this is talking about the Doctor regenerating. And at the time, the word regeneration wasn't used. It was the Doctor has renewed, and they didn't even know the process. But the annual was trying to probably explain what the audience was asking. How did this happen? Because in the show,
I've got to cut you off. Very, very important. You know why they couldn't use the word renew? because he didn't have the round thing in the palm of his hand like they do in Logan's Run.
That's probably not the reason, but you never know. But yeah, the annuals tried to fill in the gaps that the narrative in the show hadn't done yet. So they talk about his old body wearing out and him, changing like a butterfly out of a chrysalis into a new person, where he's a new body but is the essence of the original. So it's a very, very different take on regeneration back then. And also it's interesting to see someone didn't tell them that they didn't have the rights to the Daleks, because there was a board game in the middle of this annual, and there's a couple of Daleks in the middle of it that they managed to, sneak in. There's a couple of crossword puzzles and pictures, and on the back there's the Ben and Polly, and Ben and Polly were the companions at the time. And the annuals sometimes used the companions from the series and sometimes just made up their own. But what used to really annoy me is when they got the companions and then they got the name wrong all the way through. So, they'd get it just a little bit off. They'd call Susan Susie or something like that. So the annuals are quite interesting.
It's funny, you look at him playing the recorder down here, and you would never guess in a million years that's a Doctor Who thing. You think, Patrick Troughton's just been in some kind of Pied Piper movie or TV series. That looks very unusual, but whatever.
It does, yeah. And it is one of those things as well. You'll notice this later. The early episodes of Doctor Who, he had the stovepipe hat, and it was only in a couple of episodes, but they obviously got all the publicity photos from that, sent them to the annual people, sent them to the people who do the comic strips and all of that. So for his entire run in artwork, he's always wearing the giant hat and jumping around like the Pied Piper kind of thing, where it was really phased out pretty fast with Patrick Troughton.
Speaking of which, he looks different already.
The last two 60s annuals, probably, the one with the Cyberman kicking down the door of the TARDIS and coming through is one of my favourite pieces of merchandise ever. Just the way it's illustrated with the TARDIS in red and the Doctor and Jamie and the Cybermen. I found that and I was just blown away. When I saw that in a collectible book, I was like, I could not believe there was an annual with Cybermen in. And then you get the annual, and of course, on the back, you can see there's the Cyberman, the Yeti, the Cyber Controller, and in the inside page, again, there's the Yeti and a Cyberman. Not a single one of them appear in the annual. The annual is quite, it's got the Celestial Toy Shop, which is, again, disappointing because it doesn't have the Celestial Toy Maker in. Again, the artwork is variable, where you've got different artists do different stories, and some of them are working from photos, which are quite familiar publicity photos, and then some of them it's quite bad. But they do quite a good job with the Doctor, Zoe, and Jamie. If you collect annuals, I think the Hartnell ones are the highlights of the collection, just with art and the different variation of stories and content.
So there's always room for a teddy bear. Good to see that in the old Celestial Toy Shop. And when you talk about vampire plants, you automatically think of Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors. But there you go. Oh, hello. We've just crashed our system. All right. So while we fix that up, I'm just going to go back here. So just have a chat about something else, and I'll get back to you in a sec.
So the Doctor Who annuals are pretty hard to get in Australia. Anything from before the 80s is hard. The 79 annual is one that turns up all the time. The 60 stuff is getting very hard to find anywhere. On eBay for this stuff, for the mint annuals, you're looking £100 plus, which is getting a lot for the book, except for the first annual, which they sold 10 times as many of as sort of anything else. And you can still, pick that up for the minimum bid of like £5. And it's one of the best annuals. So if you are looking for this stuff, eBay is a good place to find it. There's a few online dealers that have some of it. Yep.
So Mark has said that the Doctor and Jamie were a good pairing, which is true. And Michelle has actually asked, have you ever seen a piece of Doctor Who, like old classic memorabilia, and realised that it's actually you didn't want it? I assume that's after you've purchased it. So what do you reckon?
No, I want every single piece.
Spoken like a true collector. I love it. So there you go. Very, very good.
So, as I was saying before, the companion to the Doctor Who annuals were the Dalek books. And I think the creative team behind the Dalek books really were, firing on all pistons. They had, that sort of boys' own adventure book happening. They would do their own stories. They would adapt some of the comic book stories that were out at the time. They would do photo stories and puzzles, and they're generally a lot more entertaining read for someone who's sort of that age group, in a boy who might be into Doctor Who. Interestingly, down in the bottom corner, there's a lot of pictures of the Dalek story from the first series of Doctor Who, and apparently they got in trouble with that because they didn't tell the BBC they were going to do it, and even though they had the rights for the Daleks, they didn't have the rights to use Carol Ann Ford's image, who was Susan. So she had to get her agent to go in and get a special payment, and I think I read somewhere she got a £5 bonus for them using her in that comic strip. So it always pays to have an agent chasing up on these things.
Yeah, and in pounds, we're talking about actual like currency. They didn't just feed her a shitload of cheeseburgers or something.
Yeah. So there's some firsts in this annual. There's the first anatomy of the Dalek, where you could actually see what's inside the Dalek. And I think there's been a few of these, but it pretty much holds true. What they drew there, they've kind of has been embellished on down the ages, and it's pretty much stayed the same. And then the Dalek annual kind of had a lot more Dalek stories, and the Daleks in the show became a bit, shouty, exterminate, but they were a lot more scheming and had a society and things like that in the books and the annuals.
So was there a Khaled mutant in the middle? Probably not at this point, eh? Because that came much, much later, didn't it?
It's up the top. So there was a mutant there, but it is sort of sitting in the housing at the top of the Dalek.
Fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
So,
nicely done.
Here we go. And the second one is the Dalek World Annual, and this is a bit of a brag for me because the artwork in the top centre there is one of the pages from the Dalek Annual, and I actually own that piece of artwork. I'm a big collector of the art. So you can see the art at the top, the mechanical planet. That's the original piece of art, and then the book underneath is it in the book. And I got that from my friend Mick Hall. And he was telling me a fantastic story about the Doctor Who annual artwork, where back in those days, the art was very disposable. And so when an artist, gave their work into world distributors or the different bookshops or comics or whoever was putting the book together, often they didn't get it back, and they didn't really care because it was just sort of, they were knocking it out so quickly, the art was going out, they were getting paid, and then they're on to their next thing. Apparently the warehouse or the offices where world distributors were moved, and they just left all the artwork there. And he was saying there was a record fair or a collectible fair in London, and one of the cleaners they just said, throw it all out, put it all in the back of his car, took it to a collectible fair and just had everything for £10 each. So this is sort of priceless to collectors. And this, he was saying, was before the time of mobile phones. So there was all these people, going in knowing what it was worth, pulling out all the ones they went, going out to the phone booth, calling a friend, and they would be like, oh, we're an hour away, and burning down as fast as they could. But this is where a lot of the artwork got saved, because you might think, oh, that's a bit unscrupulous of the person, they're cleaning out, but they've taken it all. Mm-hmm. But it's actually quite good, because all this stuff only exists because someone did that. And that's where a lot of the earlier artwork comes from. And it wasn't just the internal pages, it was the covers and all the sort of big double splash pages and stuff like that. So it was really interesting to hear that's how it got out into the public, because the publishers cared about it so little and the artists didn't really want it, that it was going to be chucked, and it wound up at a collectible fair.
Yeah, that's just history repeating itself again and again and again. Collectors, by their very nature, will buy something to hang on to it, to treasure it forever, whereas the people who produce this stuff, it serves its purpose and they get rid of it. So, and to be fair, you can understand it from that perspective. It is a business operation. We've used it, it's done its thing, get rid of it, move into the next item. And yeah, it's collectors who are renowned for, probably some of the greatest history or pieces of art in history have been saved purely because of collectors. So, but yeah, it's just the way it works. And of course, who knew that Doctor Who would keep going for another 50 years? So, yeah, it's everybody's got a story to tell when it comes to stuff like that. And you are right. It's amazing how much history has been saved because of people who just said, no, I want that for myself. And it's been looked after ever since. Very, very cool.
And this is the the final of the 60s Dalek books. This is the Dalek Outer Space book. And what is really interesting about this one is it has Sarah Kingdom in, who was the companion on the show at the time. She was only in, one story, the Dalek Master Plan, and she was killed in that. So it wasn't like she was going to go on to bigger and better things. But at the time, the BBC was pushing a Dalek story, a Dalek series to be made and produced in America. And it was going to be about the Space Security Service and their fights with the Daleks. And it almost seems like all the ideas that they were pushing for that show didn't get used, or if it did get used and was going to be picked up, they gave them all to the book company so they could incorporate it into the book, so the book would be relevant and would advertise the show, or it would tie in with the show. So where the other Dalek stories have got, the other Dalek books have got stories that sort of are about the Daleks and them plotting nefarious things and all that stuff. This has got a lot about the Space Security Agency and how it works and how they fight the Daleks and how they're spying on what the Daleks are doing and how they want them to not invade Earth and all that kind of thing. So it's really an interesting annual, and again, a lot more interesting than the stuff that was happening in the Doctor Who annual, where every second story he's fighting giant insects kind of thing. And there's a lot of Dalek lore that kind of goes into this. Yep, what were you going to say, Dave?
Don't go knock on the giant insects, dude. I mean, many a Hollywood classic sci-fi movie of the 50s was big-ass freaking bloody bugs running around.
Yeah. April has said it's Jean Marsh, and it was Jean Marsh, and she was she could have been at the time, a Diana Rigg Avengers girl kind of companion. If she'd been on Doctor Who, would have been really interesting. But they aged her to death in the Dalek Time Destructor, which was quite a... I guess graphic for its time to see like a Doctor's companion age to death and then collapse into a skeleton and then turn into dust.
She chose Paul. Yeah. Last Crusade, that's how the guy dies on that. Very, very cool.
So we move on from the annuals to the other books that were some of the early Doctor Who merchandise. And this is some of the rarest Doctor Who merchandise there is, mainly because the books are so disposable. And again, there was a lot of them sold from the sales figures, but they just do not turn up. And it's because if you've got a colouring book and you give it to your kid and he colours in all the pages, and let's face it, most kids just get a texter and just mash all over it. They're not that the greatest colourers. They're not the things that you collect forever for posterity. So finding them is very hard. Finding them unused is absolutely impossible. And whenever they do turn up, it's usually only on eBay. And there's always bidding wars over them. They always go for a lot more than all the other books that are sort of around at that time. To get a mint unused one, usually you're looking at £200 plus. So you're looking at about $500 landed for a colouring book.
So you're right, Thomas. I mean, the key thing about the old art is it was all done by hand, whereas you can imagine these days everything's all sort of like done on computers. Just to sort of cut costs and make life easier, and it means you don't have to use specialized artists to produce anything based on like what they do for today's material. Whereas back then, someone would have to like sit there and actually with an easel and actually paint the whole thing out. That's one of the reasons why I think there's a lot of love for this sort of material because of that history.
It has that nostalgic warmth to it that a lot of sort of the Photoshop stuff these days doesn't have. Yeah. The books as well, it's quite obvious with a lot of them that they have a couple of pictures they're using as reference for the Doctor. So there's usually a sort of nice painting of the Doctor on the cover, and the rest of the books might have a couple of pictures of the Doctor and really, really dodgy robots and aliens where they've just said to the artist, just do whatever you want. There's no reference to the series and there's sort of no reference to the show. You might get a really badly drawn police box in there sometimes, but there's really nothing else. So they really are just sort of collectible because they have nice, bright covers. And I've got to point out, maybe to Michelle, that Doctor Who and the Planet of the Zactus is the only Doctor Who book I've never owned. I have found that absolutely impossible to track down. So that's my friend Jonathan sent me through that picture so I could use it in this presentation.
Yeah, when Jonathan sent through the picture to Aaron, he had a little line attached to it going, So, and what I like about this, of course, the big ass ants Well, they're not ants, but they look like ants. The bugs are back, so you can't knock a massive bug. What can I say? Doctor Who is built on massive bugs, so I've got to love that. There you go. Mark has said they need to do reprints for nostalgic fans. If they did them as posters, maybe, rather than trying to reproduce the book, it might not be such a bad idea. But yeah. But you got to remember, a lot of this stuff is like lost to history. I mean, only people like Aaron and a few other collectors would be consciously aware of this material even existing. For most people, they just long since moved on. So that's the downside to it. So yes, it becomes a curiosity for a very short period of time. There you go. I'm sorry, man.
But even harder to get than the colouring books are the sticker books, because, you know, if you give a kid a colouring book and he's not too into Doctor Who, it just sits there. But every kid loves a sticker. And the sticker books, they basically were like the same kind of illustrations as the colouring book, but in the centre pages or the N2 pages, there was a set of stickers, and you peeled the stickers off and you put them in the book. So instead of colouring them, you filled them in with stickers. So these are my two sticker fun books. Both of them have all the stickers used. I think there is only one known example of each of those that don't have the stickers used. So every single one out there has the stickers fully used. So I'm happy with those ones, because it's not like I need to flick through to look at the art and the stories too much. But they're two books that are very, very hard to find. If you collect the hardbacks, you know that they're really hard to get and expensive. But if you collect the old sticker books and stuff like that, I think the red one on the left, I've only ever seen two for sale ever, like in 40 years. So that is a rare book.
Yeah, I agree with you. Trying to find sticker books that haven't had the stickers removed, because you're right, that's the very first thing you would do. And of course, back then, nobody would have given any thought about saying, hey, let's just leave it mint condition and just see what happens 50 years from now. So unless the store had them and they didn't sell, and if they didn't throw them out and they returned them back to somewhere, and then from there they ended up in someone's house, who knows? But yeah, you're right.
That'd be the only way.
You'd like to think that somewhere in the world there's two of these in mint condition unused, whether that's correct or not. So there you go.
Yeah. So again, they're the kind of things you get for the covers, but the content isn't really that amazing. And here we go with the actual fiction books. Now, Doctor Who, I think, is in the Guinness Book of Records now for the longest continuing series of books. That used to be a German science fiction series, but I think Doctor Who finally nudged in front of it. It's hard to believe that in the 60s, they started the novelizations of the show, and there are only 3 books done in the whole 60s that were novelizations of the series. There was Doctor Who and in an exciting adventure with the Daleks, which was the first book, and then they brought out the Zabi and the Crusaders, which was the Web Planet and the Crusade. So they were the first fiction books based on the series, and even though they must have sold quite a lot of them, I mean, the Daleks got 3 60s editions and then a 70s edition. They are still very, very hard to find. The hardbacks are hard to find non-ex library, because if you're a kid and you've got your pocket money, you probably buy the paperback, and it's going to cost you 50 cents rather than the hardback that's going to cost you £5 or whatever they were back then. I don't think they were that much, but so most of them went to libraries, which means finding non-ex libraries with nice dust jackets is incredibly hard to track down these days. And recently they're so popular. The BBC about 5 years ago did facsimile editions and reprinted all of them. So even though they've released hundreds and hundreds of Doctor Who books now, those first 3 are still pretty popular with collectors.
Speaking of which, Mark has the one on the bottom right. Assuming you're talking about an original pressing, Mark, not a reprint, which is kind of cool. And I did notice that the author of these books, David Whittaker, any relation to good old Jodie?
No.
That'd be an interesting link.
No, he's not.
No.
Yeah.
Well, what are the chances, that a guy who wrote about Doctor Who books, his daughter or granddaughter ended up becoming a doctor in a series 50 years later? Who would have thought that, So
it is. Yeah. And the other thing that was out at the time, of course, was the comic books. So comic books started pretty early with Doctor Who, and the first issue of the Doctor Who comic books were in TV Comic, and they pretty much mimicked the first episode of the series. But instead of the Doctor going off with Ian and Barbara and Susan, his niece and nephew, I think it's John and Gillian, turn up, and they do the same thing where the Doctor's like, no, don't touch that button. And of course they push the button and that's it. They're off for space and time adventures for the rest of the run, kind of thing. The Doctor Who comic started as a black and white 1-page and then eventually worked its way up till the centre spread, where it was a lot more popular, and it was in colour, and it ran through the entire William Hartnell run of his Doctor. And down the bottom, you can even see Doctor Who was popular enough that in the My Book of TV Stars, which came through TV comic, Doctor Who was one of the stickers that was available in that. And that's quite a hard little thing to find. But the tip on eBay is you don't look for Doctor Who, because the ones that have Doctor Who have a lot of people bid on them. If you just look for My Book of TV Stars and one turns up and they haven't put Doctor Who in the title, it usually goes for under about $10.
I love the thing, as you said, don't touch that button, whatever you do. And then the next panel, the kid has just said, all right, I won't touch it. There you go.
Yeah. And the companion to TV comic was TV Century 21. And this was unusual because this TV Century 21 was mainly Jerry Anderson stuff. So it was Thunderbird, Stingray, Fireball, Supercar, all of those Jerry Anderson stuff. But someone at Century 21 decided, well, Daleks are the thing. So it was all Jerry Anderson stuff and Dalek comics. And the Dalek comic in TV Century 21 is an absolutely amazing comic. There's a couple of different illustrators that did it for its run. They all have very unique styles. And now, I don't know if I've told the story about this, about the collection. I went to Records and I saw a collection of these destroyed. I went out to do a house call looking at a record collection for people who were downsizing and moving into units because they were retired and they had to get rid of, 3/4 of their possessions because they don't have room. And I went to look at the record collection. And while I was looking at the record collection, which took about 2 hours because they had thousands of records, they were packing the crockery in their kitchen. So I went in with about that many records, not very many, and said, oh, all the other ones are pretty much useless. Give them to the op shop. And I said, but I am very interested in the TV 21 comics you've got. And they said, are they worth something? And I said, yes, I'll give you so much an issue. And they looked at each other very, very, weirdly. And they said, we did something really dumb. While you were looking at the records, we just used hundreds of comics, tore them up and used them to pack the crockery. And I was like devastated because at the time I didn't have them. And the ones that there were mint. And I said to them, why did you keep these for 30, 40 years and then you've torn them all up? And they said, well, they were our sons and we kept them in the garage and now we're moving. We rang him and said, do you want any of your stuff back? And he said, nah, just throw it all out. So we thought we'd recycle it. So we just used it to pack the crockery. And I bought, that many and they destroyed like that many. And I just couldn't even look at what had gone. So,
well, this is Greg's response. No, so no one has seen a grown Aaron cry, but he would have shedding tears. Is like, oh, that's just right before your very eyes too.
That was my response too. So they're very hard to get, and they're very hard to get in Australia. And apparently the people had emigrated with them, so they brought them from England, kept them for 30 years, and then tore them up and used them to pack crockery. But there you go. Yes, it hurt. So
there are plenty. One day we'll do an episode of just horror stories, and it will make people cringe of collectables and collections that have just found that they've just been destroyed for the wrong reasons by the wrong people, and it's just like,
I have a lot of those stories. But when it's something Doctor Who and it's personal to me, then it's even more biting. So
yeah, exactly right. Anyway, we move on.
And here's the other lot of TV 21 comics. They had about 6 covers over the run of the entire series, and they covered the Doctor Who movie. So Doctor Who came into it, but it was Doctor Who. It wasn't the Doctor. It was Doctor Who, the Peter Cushing Doctor Who from the movie. And if you're after these, they are still a really good read. And on the right there is the Daleks bookazine, which is available now. And they went back and got as much of the original TV 21 artwork and rescanned it in high def and fixed it up. And they've just released that. So now I can read that and I don't have to touch my original copies and damage them. So that's available sort of around now. And I think it's going to be one of those things when it disappears, it'll be a little bit collectible itself. The other interesting thing about TV 21, they introduced the Emperor Dalek, which is down at the bottom there with the big dome head, before the TV series did. And that's the mechanoid that Daggers is pointing to. They introduced the mechanoids after the chase, and They were part of TV21, and they expanded it from one episode into a sort of intergalactic war with the Mechanoids and the Daleks. So if you like that kind of stuff, it's riveting. Great reads, TV21 comics. Also there, sorry, Dags, there's...
I was going to say, I just saw a big round thing, and I thought, that's got to be it. And it's like, oh, well, they all look the same to me. What can I...
That's okay. Up in the top corner, TV21 did albums, and there's the mini album there with the Doctor Who theme on, and down the bottom is the Dalek album, which is basically an episode of Doctor Who, the last episode of The Chase on vinyl. So we're going to look more at vinyl later, but I put that with the TV21 stuff because it was kind of themed in. TV21 Dalek stories ended with the Daleks finding Earth and saying... and everyone going, oh no, Daleks have finally found Earth. What's going to happen? TV21 lost the rights to the Daleks, and they went to TV Comic. So everyone switched over from TV21 to TV Comic, and then the story didn't continue. So that was a bit of a shame. So we go over to TV Comic.
Very good. Now, before we do that, and now it's 9:30, so we're technically supposed to be finishing up, but we've found a nice finishing point. So if you can stick around, everybody, for the next, say, less than 10 minutes, that'd be great. Okay, so yeah.
Yep. So this is TV Comic, and the Daleks jumped across to TV Comic, and the Doctor had regenerated into Patrick Troughton. Now, it's really interesting because everyone loves the TV21 stuff, and they kind of said when it went to TV Comic that the comic got... a bit average. I absolutely love the run of TV Comic Doctor Who stories. It went from being, I guess, space opera drama to wacky comic book Doctor Who, which is kind of how the show went. It went from, being a bit more, it went from being serious to a bit more lighthearted with Patrick Troughton sort of jumping around and doing stuff. They have stories where the Cybermen are riding giant wasps, and the Cybermen wrestle the Doctor for dominance of the universe kind of thing. And you have the Doctor using his recorder to disable giant insects, and the Doctor climbing inside Daleks and pretending to be the Dalek and looking out the Dalek's eye stalk. So I really loved the TV comic version of Doctor Who, and it's really underrated, and they're really, really hard to find as well. One of my favourite covers ever on comic books is this one, which is a really amazing dematerializing TARDIS, where you kind of half see the TARDIS as solid, and at the bottom you can see through it. In the comic books before this, they kind of just drew the TARDIS with a swirl around it, lots and lots of swirls. So that was meant to signify the TARDIS dematerializing. And when I saw this comic, I'm like, not a special comic at all, but that's a really amazing piece of work for the period it was. And if you look at the black and white picture in the corner, this is the end of Patrick Troughton, where they actually regenerated him in the comic when they knew he was leaving. But rather than the Time Lords regenerating him, he regenerated in a story with animated scarecrows into John Pertwee. So that was the last panel of Patrick Troughton. But when we go on into the 70s, we'll look at where TV comic went then. But it's really interesting that they had their own continuity. And down the bottom there, you have the Cybermen. Even though the Cybermen changed constantly through the 60s, TV comic always used the 10th Planet Cybermen, which I absolutely loved because I thought they were creepy. So when I found out that they were the Cybermen in the comic, I had to go and get all those issues as fast as I could.
I got to say, I really like the color. The color in this is outstanding. That alone is just so eye-catching. It's just wonderful, really, really striking. So
yeah, it really is.
Very, very cool.
And talking about colour then, the first of sort of the box games we're going to get into, one of my favourites is the jigsaws. And these are probably my favourite artwork from the 60s, some of the 60s jigsaws. The artist, Walt Howarth, who did some of the annuals, did the paintings for these. And I really wish, my dream would be they made a second series of jigsaws that, did the Cybermen and the Ice Warriors and the Yeti or something like this. But because it was the Daleks were popular at the time, the jigsaws from the 60s are all Dalek jigsaws. And the ones at the top there are wooden jigsaws. So they're kind of the sort of lower age group who do those small wooden jigsaws. And all the pieces are actually the shape of the characters. So you can take them out and you can stand them up and play Doctor Who and the Daleks, and then you can put them back into the jigsaw, which is pretty cool. And excuse me. And then the ones down the bottom are like larger jigsaws. And it's interesting.
You're getting so excited about the Dalek jigsaw puzzles, you can't speak properly anymore.
I'm foaming at the mouth. The one down the bottom in the center with the Dalek coming into the TARDIS. Sorry, excuse me.
Oh, we've killed Aaron. It's the Doctor Who is killing the It's killing me, mate. I can't get it out. I've got to talk about it.
They had to withdraw. Why do you think they had to withdraw that jigsaw?
Because the girl?
No, because children would find it too scary that a Dalek had actually made it into the TARDIS.
Okay.
So they had to withdraw it because they thought that might upset the children, and it was replaced to the one on the left, which is the army man with the Dalek sort of looking through the door of a military operation kind of thing. So
I like that. He's not choking up, he's chocking up, according to Mark. So there you go. Mate, poor old Aaron, mate. What's happening? You're chocking up, son. Somebody's not chucking up, so there you go. Here's a question for you. Why the apostrophe? So it's like Daleks is like a plural term. I mean, so Daleks jigsaw doesn't have to be like, that means only one Dalek and is meant to put it together. It doesn't make any sense at all why they put the apostrophe in, because they didn't do it at the top.
I don't know. That's one of those things I've never ever really thought about. Maybe the Dalek owns the jigsaw.
Now, are these yours? Do you have these?
Yeah, these are all mine.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
So, you know they're mine because you know what's coming up in a couple of slides' time.
Indeed,
so this is for anyone who wants to be super anal. There's two versions of all of the jigsaws. The first release, they had a perforated edge where you sort of tore the box open to get to the jigsaw. The second release, they had flaps, like a box that you open the end flaps and you can put them back in that way. The first release is the top where it has the original Dalek coming into the TARDIS, and then the second release is the bottom where they've replaced it with the Dalek coming into the military headquarters kind of thing. So if you really want to get all of them, like me, you have to have both versions, the one with the original box and the one with the second box, and then find them all with complete no pieces missing, which is pretty hard these days.
Very true. And Thomas, everybody would echo your statement. Everybody was scared of the Daleks back in the day, and they were fantastic villains. You could probably argue that in terms of TV villains, they rank right up there as being the best, if not the top 5 of greatest TV sci-fi villains of all time. So
yeah,
very, very
they've definitely stood the test of time. And this was one of my lockdown activities. When it was my turn to pick what we did, I would get out a Dalek jigsaw, and you can see how impressed my son and wife are that they get to make Doctor Who jigsaws with me, which I enjoyed doing, but I wanted to check to make sure they were all complete as well. So it was the perfect time to get the 60s jigsaws out and make all of them over lockdown. So, they're all my jigsaws, and that's the last time I did them about a year ago.
So what we need to do for people out there is put a thought bubble on Kale and Tennille as to what they're thinking when this photograph was taken. I can tell you that right now.
I can tell you what Kale is thinking. I am not getting paid enough to do this activity.
Yeah, exactly right. That is very, very cool. So we might actually finish this part on that, because the next segment moves into something completely different. And otherwise we'll get stuck into this. I know we've got people who are very, very keen on this, but we don't want to keep going and everybody's sort of dropping off, and with Carol's missing out on MasterChef, and I think the front bar's on and whatever. So, but it's a good way to finish it off. The thought bubble of Paul, Kale, and Tennille sitting there going, effing jigsaw puzzles from Doctor. Oh, party. I can imagine you said to them, "Oh, guess what, everybody? This is what we're going to do tonight. We're in lockdown." And again, you brought them out, and I reckon their response would have been, "He's an asshole."
I think it's unfair because whenever I go, I don't complain about what anyone else chose to do on lockdown night, and I go, "We're going to do Doctor Who jigsaws." Everyone's like, "Oh no, I don't want to do that." I'm like, I played all these games where Kale is on the computer shooting a giant poo emoji, and all these other poos are coming out, and I have to shoot them too. I think it's called The Binding of Isaac or something like that. So I thought it was very fair.
Oh shit! Sorry, Jonathan. Yeah, totally agree with you. The TARDIS, the whole thing's a thing of beauty, and it's great that they not only that they created it, but they still exist today, and that Aaron's got them. This is a bit of a long statement for you, so you can read that. Is the '60s your favourite era of the show, and it's collectibles as well? So, what are your thoughts on that, man?
It's an interesting question. I grew up here in Australia where we didn't sort of get Doctor Who like the UK, a different era, and then another era. I grew up where I watched Tom Baker for half a year, then it went back to John Pertwee and then Peter Davison, and then you'd get repeats of John Pertwee and you'd see Patrick Troughton in that and go, I want to watch more Patrick Troughton. And then they showed a couple of Patrick Troughton. This was all in the space of about 2 years. And I think for me, because they didn't show the black and white ones as much, they were the ones I wanted to see the most because we kept getting the same things over and over. And so it was always an event to get it because videos weren't around back then. And, you had to have a network to see this stuff. So even though maybe they weren't as good, because I was watching in that, oh my goodness, I'm watching this series that I shouldn't be able to be watching because I'm watching a 10th generation bootleg, I fell in love with the black and white series kind of that way. And also, when I was growing up, the only exposure I had to the earlier Doctors were the covers on the Doctor Who books. So Patrick Troughton, if you look at the covers on the books, particularly the Cybermen, the Moonbase, and the Abominable Snowman, he looks like a really angry, irritable person. So I wasn't so interested in seeing his Doctor because I thought he'd sort of be mean or grumpy. And then I saw the 3 Doctors where he's jumping around like a pixie and sending it all up and, annoying John Pertwee's Doctor. And I thought, this is amazing. So it was a case where the books totally told a different story from the series. And then I went back and watched the series and I just fell in love with it because it was so different. So I love all Doctor Who, but if I was stuck, and only could watch, a couple of stories again, they'd probably be Troughton stories and the 5 Doctors because it's got all of them in kind of thing.
I mean, there's definitely a school of thought to say that, comics and books, because there's more imagination required when you're reading them, and they can create obviously more fantastic worlds than they can in real life in a TV series that a lot of people can really dial into them, especially with books, because you're just imagining everything that's going on. It's absolutely fantastic. Funnily enough,
it's a big difference reading the Dalek Invasion of Earth and then you see the episode and the Dalek saucer is an upside down cake tin.
Yeah, exactly right. So it's very funny. Michelle and I had the same problem. I hardly ever got to watch Doctor Who because the news was on at the same time. So we're all about that. So, but the key thing is that everybody's been saying that they're very, very keen to see part 2, and he's got so much stuff here. There might be a part 3, 4, 5, and 6. Crikey, we'll have 50 years worth of stuff to get through.
We haven't even got to Dalek toys yet and Dalek Mania. So there's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot to come. So I hope everyone's enjoyed tonight. If anyone has any questions and they want us to answer them, maybe it's easier to message us at the Sci-Fi Zone page and we can answer them on the episode next week if that makes things a bit easier for everyone to get their say or their question in. Quite happy to answer any questions like that.
Exactly right. Very, very cool. So thank you for joining us all tonight, especially considering you're not in Melbourne, you're not in lockdown, whereas if you're interstate, what else are you going to do except watch us? So there you go. So, but in the interim, make sure you keep all your collectibles mint in box.
Or rip them off the card.
Don't do that. Bye.
Bye.